You are here today for Procurement in Practice, how to maximize the impact of AI for real transformation. And the picture of the iceberg is the perfect picture to have for this because we know the little teeny tip of AI, but there's so much underneath the surface that can really, really screw us up. So it's like an iceberg. And with me today, I have got the most amazing panel. I have to thank Zycus. Somehow they're always able to attract just wonderful people. So Amanda and David and Omid and Sakaya, if you can all come on camera, please. I'm going to start with Amanda and ask you to introduce yourself first. But folks, you're going to be blown away by the expertise that we have here today. So just buckle up, get your questions ready, use the Q&A box, and please join us. So Amanda, can I start with you? Will you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. And welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to be here and grateful to talk about this topic today. So, Amanda Prochaska, I've been in the procurement world for over 20 years now. Spent first 16 as a practitioner. The last 6.5 has been building Wonder Services. And we're all about solving the change adoption issues that we all experience across the board. And so AI has been near and dear to my heart. So I cannot wait to talk about it today.
Thank you. David, could you introduce yourself? Oh, David, you're on mute, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you
I
very much.
apologize.
I'm happy to be here as well. I've had the great privilege of serving as a Chief Procurement Officer and Chief Supply Chain Officer for both private equity, most notably Blackstone, and public companies such as Boston Scientific, ConMed, GE Plastics, and GE Capital. Also have an entrepreneurial line as well, where I started my own business and built that up for 14 years. It was a packaging and design business and sold that to a Fortune 500 company, and then traveled around the world teaching transitioning military men and women entrepreneurship in a program called Boots to Business. And I'll just say that, with everything I've done, I think it's really important now that we don't just have to do what we're doing today, we get to do what we're doing today. And I think everybody's really excited about the aspects of what we have all ahead of us.
Thank you, David. Omid, may I have you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. Omid Ghamami here. I spent 18 years at Intel Corporation, where I ran global corporate purchasing operations. I'm the president of the PSCM Institute, Procurement and Supply Chain Management Institute, where I have the best job in the world, getting to work with Fortune 500 plus type companies on capability building, training, consulting, and also doing public speaking engagements.
Great. And Sakib?
Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me here. I'm Saqib. I have been building various AI products for across enterprise systems for last 15, 16 years now. I'm currently the Director of AI Product Management at Zycus, leading some of the innovation charters and AI products here at Zycus. Thanks.
See, folks, I didn't lie. I have got an amazing panel here today, so I'm so excited to have these experts with us. And we're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about the impact. We're going to talk about people that are nervous about it and don't know what to do. So as we set the stage, I'd like to talk about why AI in procurement, why now? And that's what we're going to be talking about. And Omid and Sakib, why do you think so many organizations remain stuck at the pilot stage? POC, come on, guys, it's time to get past that. So can you give us some advice? I'll start with you, Omid.
Well, I think the first hurdle we really need to get past is a mental hurdle. In looking at the future, we can no longer view procurement's role as filling shopping carts faster and just automating that. Our role has to be to deliver enterprise results. And so some of the things we need to do differently to get past that stage. One, with AI, is we need to focus on proof of capability instead of proof of concept. This cannot be viewed as the executive staff as, a pet project that procurement's doing, the same as payroll trying to improve their operations. We need to prove the business value, have an adoption path, and really establish the future operating model. And to kind of give some context, I saw a recent benchmark that said that AI-enabled spend classification can accelerate savings by up to 80%, can compress sourcing cycles by 40 to 60%. These are things that CFOs care about, and we need to get their attention on that. The second one, you'll hear from me a couple of times, is coalition building. A lot of times procurement doesn't do this very well. We're great at negotiating externally, but internally we kind of struggle. The ability to build a coalition and to generate excitement You have to have executive sponsorship, and then having cross-functional support, input, a scaling plan in place. All of these things are really critical. And then I think the last one is really important too, which is to anticipate failures, but believe in the idea. And that message needs to be sent to the organization so that the first time you stumble, people don't say, oh, look, we told you this wasn't going to work. You have to tell them up front, there's going to be stumbling blocks. We're going to have some failures, but we have to believe in the idea. And by believing the idea and having established that coalition with the business units, with the stakeholders, with the C-suite, then they don't lose faith when they're stumbling. They know that this is the promised land, and we believe in that idea, and there's going to be those hiccups. So I think the companies that do these things well don't get stuck, but the ones that struggle with them are the ones that struggle with the adoption.
I agree. Sakib, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with what Omid just mentioned. And from the execution perspective, and again, just bringing in the experience of implementing AI across the board, one of the things that we see and have been generally seeing even today is either the teams pick up a use case which is too small to be addressed, or they pick up a use case which is massively big, very difficult to achieve. For any pilot project to succeed and move to the next step, what is important is we show some early wins, we pick up some great outcomes which are easy to be delivered, and how we move forward with that. So that's one of the cases that we have seen, obviously, from the side of the things. From the technology side, a lot of the times the legacy system also brings in the hiccups, the inhibitions in going forward. AI might need a different infrastructure and the setups that is required to take the pilots to be moving forward. And lastly, I think the most important part is most of these pilots are very siloed. Again, agreeing completely with Omid on this thing. It has to be a cross-functional decision where everyone signs into it and all hands on deck to make this thing successful. So that's what I can bring in.
I think you're absolutely right. And you've seen so many companies that have piloted and been successful. So I definitely, between you and Omid, I mean, we've got people that can prove it, that it's working and they've seen it work. David, I'm going to ask you, with your vast background, AI in procurement has moved from theory to reality, yet many organizations are still hesitant to actually scale it. Now, from your perspective, what is the single biggest factor holding companies back today? Is it the mental block that Omid mentioned, or do you think there's more than that?
Yeah, no, I think it's all related to that. Quite frankly, I think it's around, AI future ready skills. So I think what's happened is, I've come across this term recently, I hadn't heard it, called AI shadowing. So a lot of people are using AI in their personal, life at home,
Yes.
using it at work, and they're kind of undercover using it. And what we really should be doing as a company is embracing it and training people on it. So you may hear people say, oh, AI is dangerous, or, there's doomsayers, or there's, challenges with hallucination or whatever it might be. But that's not a reason to stay away from it. It's a reason to embrace it and train people. So the best analogy that I can think of is email. Email is very dangerous. You can click on a phishing email and take the entire company down. But the
Yep.
company doesn't say stop using email. The company says, let's train you on how to use email properly. So I think if the company would train, your company would train people on AI and how to use it responsibly, I think that would help in many, many different ways. And then, of course, there's a number of different compelling use cases that you can use, and putting, sort of this little competitive situations together with tiger teams, and, people showing others kind of what they developed and so on, can really, really go a long way. So I think it starts with the company understanding that this is a tool that needs to be used. The answer isn't AI. What's the question? AI comes in where it makes sense, but we need future-ready AI skills being handled and taught by the organization.
Absolutely. In fact, you bring up a really good point, David. We have a CPO who gives an award each week. And it's a small, just like a $25 gift card to his procurement folks for the best prompt of the week. Who has come up with the best prompt? And that's one of the things that you're absolutely right. Once you learn how to use AI, I think it's intuitive that we have to start training our own staff, which is why we have coursework on it, of course. Now, Amanda, looking across industries, because you do, as a consultant, see a lot of different industries, where are you seeing AI deliver the most tangible outcomes in procurement so far? Could you share an example?
Yeah, so I want to set the foundation of this too. Some recent studies just came out. Some of them were from Hackett Group and others, but 80% of procurement teams are piloting Gen AI. Okay. Now that's Gen AI. That's what the use at home, what we've been doing day to day. A lot of that is Gen AI focused. But another 80% of organizations in procurement are either have fully launched or are piloting and in the early stages of using agentic AI, which I thought was very interesting because that to me was kind of a later evolution of the conversation, at least in procurement. So a lot of people are piloting and or using these technologies today. So where are they using it? I have found a couple of different areas. First, agentic AI and automation of processes. And I know that has been a land that we've talked about for a very long time. How do we automate the transactional processes within procurement? An example that I'll give you is invoicing. Supplier enablement onto a lot of these different platforms has been a pain point in procurement for a very long time. Now with agentic AI and some Gen AI capabilities, invoices can basically come in however they want to come in, and the technology will read it and process it. So that is a very simple example of where these technologies can be used. Predictive analytics. We've talked about analytics, spend analytics, everything like for a very long, since I started in the industry. Predictive analytics is being enabled by AI and allowing us to see around corners that we've never been able to see before. And then I will say contracting, in sourcing, where we have a lot of data, the AI capabilities are helping us sift through all of that data and make wiser decisions, faster decisions, getting through those sourcing cycles more effectively. So cool examples, Dawn, that I came across just over the last couple of months. Supplier duplicates in our master data. Like I remember when we had to hire all these consulting firms to come in and sort through our supplier data to identify the duplicates. I saw a provider click a button the other day and boom, here are your duplicates, and it rated it by likely of duplicates. Like it was within seconds. We were able to see where we had supplier duplicates. The other one is stuff that we just don't get to very often, like QBRs. We all want to do QBRs, but I saw a technology provider, they put together an agentic AI process where the agent basically gathered all of the data, scheduled the meetings, prepared the deck, and then all you had to go in is like basically sit down with the supplier and have the conversation. I was like, that's brilliant because we never get to it in procurement. Well, we try to. Some of us are better at it than others.
Yeah. Now, can you do me a favor though? You've used some shorthand, agentic AI and Gen AI.
Yes.
Can you please describe those two for our audience?
Okay, so
we're all clear.
So agentic AI, think of agentic AI as a bot that's doing work on your behalf. And we used to have RPA in the past, which robotic process automation, which is like the first gen of this technology, where you could give it a process that it just repeated over and over again and didn't make a whole bunch of decisions. Agentic AI can actually start making decisions based off of data and insights that you have in an organization. So think about that as a really great way to automate your processes, right? Gen AI, we use Gen AI all the time. You might not know it. So your chats of the world, whatever you're using, your chat bots, that's all really Gen AI based product where it's more of like I'm asking a prompt and it's giving me an answer. So it's the best, in layman's terms, the best way that I can describe each of those technologies.
Good. Thank you so much. It's just so important that we get the terminology down because it's changing so quickly. So I appreciate that. Omid, I'm going to go back to you. And we're talking about, I want to shift from ambition to execution. All right. So that is a big deal for me. And you've long championed procurement as a value driver well beyond cost savings. And I agree. So how does AI strengthen that strategic role for us?
Well, we've always been trying to secure a seat at the table vis-a-vis cost savings, but I'm going to say something really controversial. Based on decades of experience, the C-suite doesn't care about cost savings. And the reason is because it never materializes. We give it back to the business unit and they spend it again. So there's no budget reduction for the C-suite. We need to go about this problem differently. Today, we're being held back by data silos, manual processes, firefighting. The promise of AI is it's going to get rid of those constraints. It's going to give us an avenue to establish enterprise value. And that's where we need to be able to influence the C-suite. We're going to be able to have multi-dimensional optimization. So simultaneously optimizing risk, resilience, sustainability, speed across thousands of suppliers and SKUs, and do it continuously instead of quarterly cycles. I think as far as the C-suite is concerned, one of the things we need to position is we are establishing a commercial intelligence layer inside the company. We're going to establish AI becomes a central nervous system, if you will, not just for procurement. We cannot position this as a procurement endeavor. It's going to be for the company, taking signals, ingesting signals from across the enterprise, demand changes, supplier performance, supply chain risk, geopolitical risk, ESG metrics, all of these things, and turning them into actionable insights, and not just reporting on what happened, but saying what ought we to do next. And then, we saw what happened during the pandemic with the supply chain disruptions and so forth. So instead of waiting for the disruptions and reacting to them, we're going to move from reactive to predictive and flag vulnerabilities before it hits the P&L, which is what the C-suite cares about. Buying us time to execute contingency plans, protecting revenue continuity. And then we need to, another value position is unlocking innovation and speed. We don't just protect the value, we create the value. So suggesting alternate supply lines, alternate materials, new materials, design to cost options. If you look at the Model Y Tesla versus the Model 3, it uses 76% common parts, but it became the #1 selling car in the world after it came out. So that's a huge design for cost type of example. Improving working capital, enabling entry into new markets. Really, the bottom line is we need to create a new set of value drivers, and cost savings are important, but it can no longer be the only drum we keep beating. We have to view ourselves as establishing this new nervous system, this intelligence layer for the enterprise, and get ourselves out of the back office and establish ourselves as a value-added center of profit. So it ought to become, if we do it right, it becomes kind of a no-brainer for the executive team. If we do it wrong, it's a pet project that procurement wants to experiment with, and that's the kiss of death.
Yeah, and this can no longer be a pet project. You said it exactly. So when you talk about the predictive piece of it, do you see that really helping with risk mitigation? Because you just mentioned geopolitical risk, supply chain risk, all these different things that we're dealing with. Do you think this predictive analytic role of AI is something that we can use to show executives that we're mitigating risk?
Okay, so the most shocking thing I've learned over the last 30 years is that procurement professionals in every profession, in every position, in every geography, every industry, spends between 70 and 90% of every day in unplanned activities. And I've measured that, I've tested it so many times. It is true. We cannot be a profession of firefighters because it's at the expense of being strategic. So absolutely predictive analytics. We keep getting better and better at putting out fires. I don't want good firefighters. I want Smokey the Bear. I want somebody who can prevent forest fires, and so to speak. That is what predictive analytics is going to enable us to do, to prevent these incidents from being in place and to be able to free up time. Let's say 30 to 50% of people's days gets freed up. That's almost like doubling your workforce. So yes, it's an absolute no-brainer value proposition. We need to have the predictive analytics in place.
Good. Thank you so much for that. And Amanda, you are huge on change management. I've heard you speak a number of times, and you are an expert. So if we're talking about change management, what is the biggest organizational barrier that you have to move in order to AI being an ambition to actual execution?
Yeah, and there's actually several components of it, Don. And one of the things that I've been seeing, and particularly from a change standpoint, is the way that we deploy these AI projects is very different than what we've done in the past, right? So we've already mentioned like scoping too big or too narrow, but there is a learning process within these tool sets that we have to understand. So before, like we did waterfall, if you guys know waterfall or agile, neither one of those really had, they had testing, but they didn't have learning, right? And as we're building out these models, particularly for like agentic AI, you're training just like you would almost an employee who's working on that process. You're training that agent to go through the steps and not just the happy path is what I call it. You're actually training it to do what ifs. Like, what if this happens? What if it's a dark day and something occurs? Like, that's the reality of life. So one of the big changes that I'm seeing in organizations is getting your head around that, because that takes time. It takes understanding of the nuance in your process. I remember the old days, consulting firms would at least come in and say to me, we're going to do 80%, the 80% common process. And it's like, well, that doesn't really work in this world, right? We have to get into the nuance. So it's a big mind shift for organizations to consider. And we've touched on it a couple of times here, but I'm going to just say it a little bit differently. Another big change is understanding the mission and the measurement. Okay, so mission is like, what are we trying to actually accomplish with this pilot, with this implementation? And how are we going to measure the success of that? And to the earlier points, it might not be cost savings, right? There might be other drivers that we can be talking about, but we see a lot of people just jumping in because everyone's doing AI right now, like they're piloting programs. I'm like, let's take a step back and truly try to understand what are we trying to accomplish and how are we going to measure success. And that is the root of all of the change activities that go on beyond that. If we understand the mission, if we understand the measurement, we can articulate that change out to the organization, talk about the journey and where the hiccups are going to be, et cetera. So those are two major shifts when it comes to change. But a couple of other things I just want to point out that have been barriers to success outside of change. One is getting your data right. Right? These technologies are making decisions off of your data. So if you have, like I used to have 13 IBMs in my vendor master, it's going to get confused, right? Like that you have to understand that. We're working on a project right now where we're making catalog data more robust so AI agents can read it and direct people to the right catalog items. So we have to be thinking about our data differently and really truly understanding how is it going to be used. And then knowing where to start and what's available. There is a lot of selling going on right now. A lot of we're doing this right now, but maybe not right now. Like it's coming in the horizon. So what I'll ask people on the call today is do your research, obviously, but understand where you need to start and what's coming in the future and having those honest conversations. Because I see so many people diving in and they're like, we were told that this can happen and it's not available yet. So just make sure you understand your starting point, start small, start with what's real, and then be patient because a lot of the providers are out there are building as we speak at a very rapid pace. And so just know that it will come.
Yeah,
So
and you're absolutely right. And I would say if you have not gone and had a demo recently, you don't realize how much a lot of these providers are changing at a very rapid pace and getting better and better. So it's shame on you if you just assume that your vendor can't support your AI initiative, because if you haven't done a demo lately, you don't know what you don't know.
Right. It changes. It changes every week. It's actually hard for some customers to keep up with the rate of change from some of their providers right now because it is literally changing that fast.
Yeah, and that's why I think demos and when we do our solution deep dives, it's so important for you to get in there and kick the tires and peek behind the curtain. And every single time when I go to the Zycus, for example, annual event, I'm blown away at how much more change has come out. So then I realized I can't wait a year until they have their annual event. I have to stay up on it at a constant pace because it is constantly changing. But Amanda, you have mentioned something that I've heard you talk about before called the 10-20-70 rule. Can you
Yes.
share what that is for the audience? Because I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, so it at the end of the day, it's all about, yes, there's a component of technology. Yes, there's a component of your configuration and how that works, but the 70% is your people, right? And David, you already mentioned this, like upskilling your teams. But right now, a lot of the fear that people have related to AI is, what does it mean for me and what am I going to do with my life? Like, we're talking about people's livelihoods, their day-to-days, what they're accustomed to. So when we're doing an AI deployment, we have to understand that it's not just the technology, it's about your people and understanding how are those people needing to be upskilled, or are their roles modified? How do we make sure that that they can come along with this journey? So are they going to be investigators? So moving someone from doing a day-to-day process, let's just take my example of invoice processing, right? Invoice processing that can be largely automated now with AI, but those invoice processors are going to go from inputting the keying in that invoice to being problem solvers.
Mhm.
That is a different skill set than what they're used to. So how do we make sure that those folks come along on that journey and that they can become those problem solvers of the future?
Yeah, and
Like, that's a huge part of this.
yeah, and it's often, that I try and tell people too, is that smart people don't want to do dumb work.
Yeah.
And mind-numbing work, like processing invoices, I mean, there are a few people that are okay with just not thinking all day long, but other people want to think and they want to be strategic. So by automating a lot of this work, we can elevate people. We can get them to be, how often do you not have time to soar at 20,000 feet? Because I think it was Omid said that 70% of your day is unplanned and you're just
Yeah.
reacting. Well, if 70% of my day is unplanned and then the rest of the day is trying to get caught up, when do I ever soar? And think of the organization at the 20,000 foot level. If you keep people down at the 1 foot, 2 foot, right on the ground, they're not going to soar and they're going to get bored.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
so it
it's
is
not,
the
as
people.
leaders, it's not going to happen organically, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to have those rare gems that are going to do that organically, but as a leader, we need to be thinking through, okay, we're taking one skill set and we're upskilling. How do we go through that process to make sure that they get there?
Yeah, and like David said, you will fail sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I want to dig into that a little bit in a little bit, but let's start with building the right foundation. So right now we've gone from inactivity to execution, but we have to have the right foundation to be able to do this. And I do want to mention, I'm going to drop Zycus's name into it again. They did a great short course on cognitive procurement that I would recommend any of you take. It is just fantastic and it was well done and it's only a couple hours of your time. So I would go in there and look at that because they've been leading in the AI space. So I'm going to go to Sakib. If from a product perspective, since you are responsible for that, what foundations like data quality that Amanda mentioned, intake and orchestration must organizations have in place for AI to be successful?
Absolutely. Firstly, thanks, Amanda, for bringing in agentic AI and those topic in the things. That's like 70% of my day looks like we either talk about agentic AI or we are building agents for ourselves or for our customers. That's what our day looks like. But coming to your point on, number one thing which literally we have been pushing across Zycus also is define the metrics, define what ROI, what outcomes you're looking at. That's the hash one. You are building any AI module, you're building any process flow around AI, you need to have that defined. Or the chances of it becoming a full-blown thing which doesn't yield anything is very high in that case. So first is go ahead and define what are you looking for, what are your business success metrics, whether it is cost savings, whether it is efficiency, choose, build that API and then build that KPI and then move forward. The second part is, Amanda truly mentioned data is a big challenge. There's a very common statement in AI, garbage in, garbage out. So if what you feed into the AI systems is what you're going to get out of it. At Cycus, one of the key things before we transition into the new modern era of Gen AI, what we did was we revamped our entire Zycus data platform. And we have a very highly scalable, up-to-date, enriched Zycus data platform available. And just extending to what Amanda also again mentioned is that it's not just the cleanliness of the data, but also the access and availability of the data. So that's one of the things that we keep doing is commoditizing the data across all the teams, across all the customers, so that they can use it. So these two are very critical foundations out there. I'll just give you a quick example, which Omid was also mentioning around the predictive side of things. So once we had the Zycus data platform in place, we had some layer of AI built, which was giving us some decision intelligence kind of a thing. And then we built an interface out of it. We called it Mundane Insights. We ran it under a project called Project Spark. Very simple. Just imagine David working in his office, wants to see that, okay, what is my spend? Just go and type in that, okay, tell me what is my spend last year. It would not just give you the last year's spend, it will also give you the breakups between the suppliers, between the business units, between all the categories of items is there. It will give you some highlights about the recommendations, some snapshots and everything, which will help you take the decisions very fast. The same thing with the legacy systems. David might have to go and search between the reports, go back to the analyst team, figure out, create charts, graphs, all of those things to make a decision over there, which is now very easily accessible through a chat. And that's one of the places where we're using agentic very aggressively, feeding and making it learn across the things. So that's a very quick example that we built, and it's also built on top of our spend data and all of the procurement data that we have right now. Lastly, and the most important part also is, how do we set the infrastructure in place? AI demands a different type of understanding of infrastructure, plus the implementation of infrastructure over there. We can look at players like Azure, AWS, everyone has those offerings available in our systems. How do we set that up and make it available for the users who are non-technical? That's very critical, right? We are trying to commoditize AI, and if it is not easily accessible and is sitting with, say, example, AI teams, where you have to reach out to the development team and go and build it for me, it might not scale at the level which we want it to scale. Right? Today at Zycus, every non-technical person has access to AI. They can go and build agents, plug in and do the tests, and they can obviously present the outcomes to all of us. So these are some of the very critical parts that I think. Lastly, I think the compliance and auditability is very, very critical. We need to know what AI has done, how it has done it, and the results, was it correct or not. There's a reflection module kind of a thing where the system learns, feeds into it and says that, okay, this is something that user didn't like, or whether they liked it, and accordingly learns and keeps improving the things over there. So yeah, those are some of the key foundations.
I love that. Now, David, first off, I'm still blown away with your background. You continue to impress me every time I get to hear you speak. But you have had such great experience as a practitioner. So what lessons have you learned that you could share with us about aligning AI tools with your existing systems and workflows?
Well, thank you. I've learned a lot from a lot of the folks here and involved in this webinar as well. But one of the things I've seen is, if it's a proof of concept use case, then maybe you do want to align it with existing systems and workflows and see how it goes. But I think you have to think about it more in a holistic fashion. Is, I call it, be careful about turning the house to, to put the light bulb in, right? You might want to change your workflows to accommodate this, because a lot of times the workflows now are designed because there's certain limitations, and those limitations may be lifted. So I just warn folks on saying it's not just a drop in. It has to be like, you need to pull back and say, what else can we do with this thing? And is it a different mindset on how you go after it? It's not just something you're going to drop in somewhere else and leave everything, else the same on a workflow standpoint. Because in many cases, it's going to augment and it's going to enhance a lot of the work that you're doing. And I think people will see, big advantages in that.
David, can I chime in there, Don?
Yeah.
Like light bulbs were going off. One of the big changes in organizations, David, is the point that you just made. Our legacy systems in procurement in general, I'm not going to just at a high level, we had to conform our processes to those technologies, right? In fact, when I did my last corporate implementation of a large source through pay, I went to them and I said, give me your process and we are going to use your process. That's how the whole implementation worked. With these new tool sets coming out, we can truly reimagine our processes.
Yep.
and which is great on one hand, but terrifying to people on the other hand.
Yes.
Because you're like, wow, I can reimagine this. Where do I start? How do I measure it? What does the op model look like? Like, it is a significant change to how we approach these particular implementations. A great point, David.
Yeah,
No,
I
thank
like
you.
that.
I agree. And I think the bespoke nature of some of these need to be there. So, I've seen, and Don, I think you brought it up several times and you're right on about, what is really happening today in Amanda and what's really out there. So what's being sold and what's really out there. And I think what it comes down to is you want to have a bespoke part of the solution that you can drag and drop workflows, because now you can do that without coding. And that also gets the other parts of the organization on board. So when you bring the IT folks in, you're not saying, here's your solution, it's fully baked. You're saying, help us build this, with the workflows. And it's basically, getting them involved and getting that, developing that shared need. And I think what a lot of it comes down to is a lot of the same metrics I know are not different. I mean, it's not about AI, it's about ROI. And if one of your metrics is how many AI programs did we do, that's the wrong metric. Your metric needs to be,
Yes.
what's your return on investment? And I think a really good productivity metric that a lot of people, don't not think about, overlook sometimes, is not, how many people didn't we hire or so on, but what is your percent of your spend under management now? Because when you get these kind of productivity tools in place, you can have more of your spend under management, which translates to cost avoidance or, cost reduction and so on. And that's really important because the speed of it as well is important. If you have a particular category or segment that's dropping in price, and it's dropping in price to the tune of, say, $10 or $12 million a year in the amounts that you're buying, if you delay it 1 month by getting at it, you lose approximately $1 million you'll never get back. So the metrics are similar, they stay the same, but how you get there can be assisted greatly with the use of AI.
Now, David, to do that though, so I'm a recovering CPA, so I love the math side of it. Is this where we have to go back to being able to do TCO models, total cost of ownership, really understanding where the workflows are being impacted, where we're reducing the work in order to create this ROI?
Yes, I think those are still tried and true. Somebody talked about data. I think it was you, Sakib, and talking about GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. That doesn't change. Assets equal liabilities plus capital, just to make you feel better on that end. That doesn't change. If you're a scientist, F equals MA, that's the same. But it's really around how do we get at that and drive, the acceleration of the results, in a quicker fashion. It's not about, how many AI projects can we hold up and say how great we did, because it's really about shareholder value if it's a public company.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So we can identify high impact use cases. You guys have proven that with everything that you've been talking about. So I'm going to give some quick fire questions to you. So Kip, what is one high impact AI use case that you've seen deliver tangible ROI? ROI, very important in procurement.
Sure. So one of the most important one has been the intake management that we have built up. Multiple sources from where people used to raise the request. The life of the person who is managing and processing those requests was like a nightmare for them. We have simplified it very, very simple. Go to your teams, come, enter the details. And one of the places where the agentic AI also comes in picture, right? Means it, one of the agents figures out all the policies that has been defined by the organization. One goes and searches between the catalogs, figures out the best catalog that is available, supplier risks and all of those things, and then gives you the best recommendations, selects it, and you can just go ahead and raise the intake, your request by super fast on our systems. So that has made the life of a lot of people very, very easy, has been implemented across a lot of our customers now, and they have been using it aggressively. And on talking to that thing, I know Omid is not a big fan of this cost savings part of it, but yeah, we recently also introduced the autonomous negotiation thing, where all the tail spend categories based on the organization's policies, we can open up an autonomous negotiation, goes to the suppliers, figures out, does the entire negotiation based on various parameters, various levers, and then comes back and says, okay, this is the savings that has been done. And we really see a 5 to 8% ROI on savings directly on the tail spend categories that is offered today. So yeah, these have been some very quick ones.
Good. And I do want to mention too, and then maybe Sakita, if you could drop it in the chat, the annual conference for Zycus is coming up. So if you want to share that, And maybe some people should show up and they can talk to you live at your annual event. Amanda, I'm going to jump to you. What's a common challenge, such as siloed tools or other ideas that leaders should be mindful of, and how can they set themselves up for success?
Okay, so if I was a leader looking at deploying an AI solution right now, I would first start with my data. We've talked about data quite often, but I would try to understand, is it clean? Do I have the right data? Is it accessible? Is it at the right levels? So an agentic AI, an agent can make the right decisions, right? Or we can get the right Gen AI responses when needed. So I would start there. I would also make sure that you, like I said before, understand your mission and measurement. It really helps be very focused on what problem are you trying to solve, what am I trying to achieve, and how am I going to measure it? To the earlier point of pilots being too small or too big, it also helps right sizing. So those two right out of the gate, I would say be very, very confident in both of those. But then the other thing that I would say is that there's some early studies coming out around success and what does that look like for AI in procurement. More success is coming right now. It could change because it changes very quickly by partnering with an AI provider versus building it yourself. Now, I've been a very big proponent of maybe considering building some of this yourself because the technology is relatively cheap. However, success rates are looking like you're going to be more successful partnering right now with a firm that's providing AI versus building it yourself. So that is just a consideration. If I were a leader looking at this right now, those are the three things that I would be considering and hopefully planning for, so I'm successful in the long run.
Perfect. Now, Omid and David, you have both sat in the C-suite, and David, you have 2 Cs in your titles now. So for procurement leaders who've started with AI, I'd love to get advice about what helps to ensure that adoption really sticks. And I'm going to challenge you. Do you see leaders who talk about it, but they don't, they talk, but they don't walk the talk? So what helps it stick from a leadership perspective? Omid, why don't you start? And then David, I'd love to get your comment.
All right. So this is a great question. And so I'm going to give kind of a 4-part answer here. The first is you have to start where the business feels it. We cannot drive initiatives with the perspective of procurement in mind. We have to think like the C-suite: cycle time reduction, revenue protection, working capital improvement. So when I said earlier, they don't care about cost savings, let's not turn that into a negative. The positive is they care about contributions to EBIT. That's how we need to be thinking. Then the next thing is kind of treat AI as a corporate DNA upgrade, not a procurement one. It's not a shiny tool. It's a redesign of how procurement works, but then also how enterprise value is defined. And so I kind of talked about it earlier, but this ability to liberate your people from firefighting activities, but also to liberate the business units, because AI can help them better define. Believe it or not, end users don't always ask for the right thing. They over-engineer things, they use the wrong materials, they go to the wrong side. There's all sorts of things that go wrong. And then procurement automates that. And so it can not only improve outcomes for procurement, it can dramatically improve outcomes for the business units. Then the next thing is to really drive intelligent workflow redesign. The number one mistake I see with procurement systems implementations is people automate a bad process, and then things do get better. So you get better and better at doing the wrong things, and that creates the illusion of progress. And we need to not fall into that trap. It's the wrong kind of progress. And then we need to build enterprise confidence early. So that really means communicate results in boardroom language, not in procurement language. ROI, risk avoided, margin impact, contributions to EBIT. And every win should answer the CEO question: how does this improve shareholder value? And before they ask you, you should be telling them. So that really helps us shift this to a strategic mandate that they believe in, they support, and we ensure that the adoption sticks because we have the proper backing.
I love it. I love it. David, how about you? For procurement leaders who've started, what's the one piece of advice you'll give to that would help ensure adoption? It really sticks.
Yeah, no, I think everything Omid said, I agree with in terms of, how it's all going to happen and what things are really important. I almost feel like with all these new tools and functionality that's out there, maybe in the future, we won't have people saying that are in procurement and supply chain. I've been in procurement and supply chain 25 years. I don't know if that's should be the case anymore. We should be looking for general managers. We should be looking for folks that understand how it impacts other parts of the business. But I think the important thing to understand, that it's going to stick is, I think part of the reason, and I've been banging my head up against the wall, and a lot of people have about, why isn't the adoption up higher and whatever it might be. And I think people are watching this happen so fast. And some of the, comments I've made in the past is, I believe every year in this space is like a dog year. So when people say, hey, what's going to happen in the next 2 years? It's 15 years from now. So people can't really grasp that, but they see it happening so fast. They see, ChatGPT 5 come out and they say, oh, you know what? I'm going to wait for an easy button. I think an easy button's coming. And they're afraid to make a commitment because they think something else maybe, as you said, Amanda, they can't see around the corner. But one thing I will tell everybody here, in my opinion, no matter what, line of work you're in, if there's over 100 people on this webinar or whatever, the biggest cost every one of us would see in AI is the cost of doing nothing. That's the biggest cost everybody's going to have. So you need to move on it. It doesn't mean you have to move recklessly. You got to scale smartly. But when it comes down to what management's doing, I remember when I started as a chemical engineer in the plant, they said safety was the most important thing. So they did a calendar test, and the plant manager never spoke about safety. So you really need to speak about it, and you need to make sure that people understand that you support it.
Yeah. And we have some non-tech forward CPOs out there. So I think once they retire, I think it's going to help a lot. But for example, we have a member that his boss, who is the CPO, every morning at 6 a.m. gets up and uploads an Excel report so they know what to start picking from the warehouse. This is a CPO who's took it upon himself every morning at 6 a.m., including Saturday and Sunday. He uploads up a report manually. That is just dumb. That's just dumb. So if you have a procurement leader who's talking about AI and showing that they're using AI and showing that they're improving the workflows or replacing workflows completely, I mean, to me, this CPO needs to retire. And I'm not going to name names, but
The one comment, if I may, Don, one comment I'll make on that is, it's amazing that people say, hey, maybe I don't want to embrace this because I'm not sure if what it'll do to my job. Well, is your job guaranteed if you don't embrace anything? Is your job guaranteed if there was no AI? I mean, you always have to be improving. So I don't understand why if you do nothing, you feel more secure. I don't think that's accurate.
I agree. So Omid, the question had come in and we folks, I know we only have 7 minutes left. We have a ton of questions. We will get your questions answered and out to you. And I have a few that have come through to me personally in the chat as well. So Omid, I'm going to share with the first one. Could you share any statistics on AI improvements to sourcing and spend impact? You mentioned some of this earlier. It'd be great to share with my executives.
Well, some of the things that I've seen, organizations classify 12 months of spend data in under 2 weeks, identifying millions of dollars in sourcing opportunities. I mean, that's the kind of thing that in my day, that took forever. Contract intelligence, AI models with clients identifying risk clauses with greater than 90% accuracy, recommending alternative language, reducing contract cycle time. We all know contracts go to the legal department to die. And instead, we can have systems do that much, much faster. Guided buying and risk prediction, having great results with that. Now guiding users to preferred suppliers, flagging non-compliant requests at the point of need, proactively looking at supply risks before the disruptions. And then now we've got auto-generating a performance-based scope of works, multivariate sourcing scenarios across price, lead time, ESG, other sort of risk variables. And the one I'm most excited about personally is this autonomous multi-round negotiations with suppliers. That's just a game changer, because while you're sleeping or you're doing other activities, the tool is at work, not with one supplier, with zillions of suppliers, proactively renegotiating, benchmarking, securing best-in-class deals. It's just an exciting time to be in procurement.
Good. I like that. Now, someone has asked if we can share a transcript of the actual webinar, and I am going to have us pull it. We will share it with Zycus and get permission to share it with all of you. You will get a link to today's recorded webinar and the slides, except about SIG. But you will get a link to that. So that will come out to you in about 24 hours. Once this is rendered, you can watch it, you can share it among your organization. And once we get permission from Zycus about sharing the transcript or not, then we will see about sending that as well. Because I do see that there's so many great nuggets in this one that it would be great to have it in writing as well. So I appreciate that, Adam. I'm glad you've asked that question. Now, David, I think this is probably to you and Omid mostly, but I'm currently working on a way to measure the procurement sourcing ROV, return on value. Are there any ideas on what to measure other than the usual cost reduction and supplier performance?
Well, we kind of talked about earlier some of the key value points. The key thing is to speak in the executive's language and to know what are the things that they care about: revenue protection, avoidance of supply disruptions, and things like that. And I just want to add something. I had an epiphany 2 weeks ago that I wish didn't take 31 years to come to fruition. But I thought about which one of my clients, the ones that were well-resourced, the ones that were able to get the funding, the resourcing, the headcount to drive these kind of initiatives, what did they all have in common? And what I finally realized was it wasn't their results, it wasn't their processes, it wasn't their presentations, it was they had a direct relationship with the CEO. That was the one thing all of those clients had in common. I can't emphasize that enough. It's not just about the value drivers that you establish, it's who you establish it with and having that direct relationship. And that makes everything flow. It's the only thing those clients had in common that I look at.
Yeah. And so, David, I would like to ask you that same question on where would you emphasize a return on value, other things to measure that you've seen in the business units?
Yeah, no, I think, the definition of return on value, I'm going to assume it's the same for me as it was for the person who asked that. But I think it goes back to what you said, Don, as well. It's really total cost of ownership. There's really more components than just, the unit cost of something. And I think that's really important, especially in today's marketplace, what's happening with tariffs, moving things around from different, manufacturing locations and so on. And I really do believe that when you look at what some of the cost of these items really are, you should be returning 10x the value of many of these things. So it shouldn't be something like, well, I paid $100,000 for this and I got $100,000 in return. That's really not going to work. So I think on the return on value side, like you said, it's really, and Omid said, is how does the company define value? Because I know on the procurement side, if you save money, even though the net company may not have saved it, as you said, Omid, if that company was given to sales to become more competitive so that they could win business, then maybe it's not PPV, but it's value for the company.
Yeah, and McDonald's is a great member of SIG, and they've translated it. They said the only way we get the executive's attention is that with our savings that we identified, that's how many less hamburgers they have to sell. And I thought, what a simplistic way to say it. But if I can save you from having to sell another 2 million hamburgers next year, wow, I've just reduced the stress on the system by 2 million hamburgers. And I believe it was Lowe's that was using board feet. How much lumber do I have to sell? How much lumber do I not have to sell next year? So it's finding the language that resonates. But I mean, no, we don't have time. Darn it. You guys, these questions are so good. And Omid, they said that your insight from your client experience regarding establishing a relationship with CEO is starkly accurate. Do you have oh my gosh, the questions are just flying in and the comments flying in. All I have to say is thank you to Zycus. Missy, I agree. I loved this. I told you I was bringing you the Zycus was bringing you a great panel. I got to play with them today. So thank you for your time, everybody. Thank you for your attention. We will get all these questions over to our panelists. We'll get the answers in writing. And you guys, that time just flew by, but we only asked for an hour of your time. So we're going to honor that. And Amanda and Omid and Sakib and David, thank you from the bottom of my heart for just a fantastic panel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Don.
Have a
Everyone,
wonderful
wherever
day.
you are, stay safe, stay happy. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.